McCormick.
I'm Alexis O'Leary.
I'm Lila Kirkpatrick.
I'm Henry Gracia.
I'm Andrew Welcome.
I'm Kate Long.
And we are investigating the behavior of juvenile green sea turtles using animal-borne cameras. Science is based on observations, and one of the ways these observations change the way that we look at the natural world is through the use of cameras mounted onto wildlife, or as we call them, animal-borne cameras. Conventionally, we as humans are the observers. However, with these cameras, the animals are the ones that are doing the observing. Animal-borne cameras have been used on penguins, sharks, whales, and dolphins. However, because of the restrictively large size of these cameras, they have only been able to be placed on these large animals. With the advancements in technology and the miniaturization of these cameras, they are now able to be placed onto smaller animals without restricting their movements or affecting their behavior. And because of this, we are able to place these cameras onto juvenile sea turtles for the first time ever.
The perfect place to study juvenile green sea turtles is here in South Eleuthera due to the abundance of mangrove creek systems. Turtles inhabit these habitats for two main factors: food and shelter. The mangroves across South Eleuthera are rich in algae and seagrass, which are turtles' two main food sources. In addition, the structural diversity provides refuge from predators. CDI has been conducting research in these mangrove creek systems for 6 years now. A long-term tagging project has helped us to understand the growth rate of sea turtles, the size at which they leave the creeks, and the size at which they enter the creeks. However, despite this, we're still unaware of how these individuals spend their times while in the creeks. Although many people in this room may believe that turtles are solitary animals, recent research indicates that they're more social than we previously thought. However, we're still unaware of the purpose of these social behaviors. Therefore, we'd like to use animal-borne cameras to answer these two questions. The first is, what are the common activity patterns of juvenile green sea turtles? And the second is, do the turtles display social interactions and why?
To answer these questions, we headed out into mangrove creek systems around South Eleuthera, specifically Starved Creek as indicated by the yellow star in the picture to my left, and deployed cameras onto juvenile green sea turtles. The first step is to assign a spotter to stand at the front of the boat and scan the horizon in search of the turtle. Once a turtle is spotted, we follow it by boat until it takes 3 to 4 breaths. This indicates that the turtle is tired enough to where we can get snorkelers into the water to capture them by hand. Snorkelers enter the water and swim after the turtle until they can get close enough to reach underneath its front flippers and bring it onto the boat. Once the turtle is on the boat, we take a series of measurements. Using a fabric tape measure, we measure the length and width of its carapace. This is called the curved carapace width and curved carapace length. At this time, if the turtle has not been previously tagged, we then tag it using small metal tags, each with their own unique identifying number. Once this is completed, we can begin to attach the camera. So this is an animal-borne camera that we call the turtle cam. The turtle cam consists of a paralens camera attached to a radio transmitter that is inside a foam buoy. The foam buoy is just so that when the entire unit pops off, it floats to the surface and we can retrieve it easier. So the first step in attaching this camera is to glue the small black mesh pieces onto 3 points of the turtle's carapace using marine epoxy glue. Once this is done, these pieces are attached to galvanic time releases, which are metal links, you can see in the photo there, that corrode in water after 3 hours and allow the unit to pop off. Next, we secure the camera to the turtle using zip ties and head back out by boat to the area in which we caught the turtle to release it back into the water. After that, we wait for 3 hours or until the camera has popped off, and using this radio receiver that Lila is holding right here for you to see, that communicates with the transmitter inside the buoy and emits audible frequencies, allowing us to locate the approximate area of the unit, retrieve the camera, and begin to analyze the footage.
Alright, so in terms of the analysis that Alexis is talking about, we take all of the footage that we've collected so far and we divide it up into 30-minute sections. We comb through these sections on a second-to-second basis, and we're looking for any of the behavioral patterns that these turtles might be exhibiting. From our footage, we've compiled a short video for you all to see today, just of clips of the kind of actions that these turtles are displaying. Before we start, I'd like to preface this, just letting you know that this is a really big deal. You guys are some of the first people in the entire world to see this footage, and it's absolutely amazing. Like Reed touched on, this is the first time we're able to see what turtles are doing from the turtle's exact perspective. So I speak on behalf of our entire team today when I say I'm really excited and really proud to show you this. Iona, could you please play? Thank you. Our first category is swimming, which is the turtle. It's self-explanatory, swimming through the water. Next, the category is feeding. Turtles in this area, like Tess said, generally eat seagrass and algae. Next, we look into resting. That's when the turtles are really just hanging out on the floor. Or sometimes they come up and pause for a while at the surface when they're taking breaths. Then we look at cleaning. That's when the turtle's rubbing its shell or carapace on the substrate, which is algae, or sponge and rock, that sort of things. Finally, we're looking at social behavior and the social interactions that these turtles have. This is the main part of our research. Obviously, it's amazing, and we're so lucky to be looking into that. Hold on. Yeah, so then we take all of the clips that we have of social interactions, and we divide them up into 3 categories. These are characterized based on kind of the mood of the interaction, I guess. The first that we look at is no response and passive interactions, which is really when the turtles just don't acknowledge each other in any way. We've had so many instances where there's another turtle in the camera lens and the turtle just swims by it and doesn't even pay attention. Next we have non-aggressive, which includes approaching, inspecting, and following. Approaching is when one turtle swims up to another turtle and then just swims away. Inspecting is, again, when it swims up to another turtle and then the 2 turtles kind of check each other out, look at what's going on, that sort of thing. Finally, in this category, we have following, which is also really self-explanatory. It's when one turtle is swimming and another turtle is just swimming after the turtle. Our last category includes aggressive behaviors, and of these we have chasing and biting. Chasing is similar to following in the sense that one turtle is swimming after another turtle, but the vibe of this interaction is very different. You can really tell that one turtle's trying to get away from the other, and there's a little bit of a fleeing aspect to it. Finally, we have biting. There's a little example of that right there. It's like a headbutt bite sort of thing. And it's when the turtle uses its beak to nibble on another turtle's head, carapace or shell, and flippers.
So far this semester we have caught 10 turtles. However, for reasons such as technical errors or just a lack of time, we've only been able to gain data from 5 of them. We've caught a range of turtles spanning from 288 millimeters to 561 millimeters, again in curved carapace length. Each turtle gives us about 3 hours of footage. So this semester we've had to analyze roughly 15 hours of footage. Going back to Tessa's question stated earlier, what are the basic activity patterns of juvenile green sea turtles? We use the data gathered from the 5 turtles that I'm talking about to classify the basic behaviors of their basic activity. This graph highlights their 6 basic behaviors that Lila talked about before in the video. The x-axis is the time since we released the turtle back into the water in increments of 30 minutes, and the y-axis is the percentages of the time spent on each behavior. In the first 30 minutes, as you can see, the turtle spends over 95% of its time swimming, and we think this is most likely due to the heightened state of stress that the turtle is in after we release them back into the water. Also, in the 30 to 90 minute range, we see an increase of cleaning behavior, which we think is most likely due to the uncomfort that the turtle has with the shell on its back. And like Lila showed you in the video, they will use substrates, which is coral or anything that they can find, to rub their shell and try to get the camera off. However, after the first 90 minutes, we get the most natural and authentic footage. So as you can see, they spend roughly 30 to 40% of their time resting, 10% of their time feeding, and across the board they spend 50 to 70% of their time swimming. The social behavior, which is the yellow in the graph, is only seen 2% across the board.
So Henry talked about the different social patterns we saw. I'm now going to focus on that small percentage that were social interactions. So as Lila already mentioned, we divided up the different interactions we witnessed into 5 different categories, which are follow, inspect, approach/head bump, no response, and chasing/biting. And we can divide this further up into 3 different groups, which are non-aggressive, no response, and aggressive. No response is when the turtles saw each other but didn't care and didn't acknowledge each other at all and swimed away. Non-aggressive is when they approached each other but did not display any aggressive behavior. And aggressive was when there was either chasing or biting involved. This next graph shows where the turtles spent the majority of their time and what they did in those different habitats. So the y-axis on the left shows the proportion of interactions, and the x-axis shows the habitat type. So as you can see, turtles spent the vast majority of their time in the algae environment, which makes sense because that is their main source of food to Starved Creek. You can see all the other habitats they spent under 20% of their time in because there was less food available. In red, you can see the aggressive behavior displayed in the algae environment. We think this is because there's competition for food in that environment. In other environments where there was less food, you can see there was no aggressive behavior displayed. Sea turtles also feed on seagrass, so we think if we were to deploy cameras in areas with more seagrass, we would also see aggressive behavior in the seagrass environment.
So what did we learn through the Turtle Cam project and where can we take it next? We first collected a lot of very fascinating footage of the turtles, and here we were able to, we looked at we first looked at where these interactions were happening, and we saw that there was a lot of there was more of negative behavior around the algae and seagrass environment, and we first asked the question. We looked into the seagrass and algae environment, which is where the negative interactions were happening, which is where we think that they became more territorial around their feeding grounds, over their feeding grounds. And then we were able to discuss the fact that they followed and they around the feeding grounds, which was the aggressive behavior. And then we discussed that this is because algae and seagrass is their main food source in these habitats, and this is so we were able to follow them, and these cameras were deployed on all of these turtles, and looking at this footage, we're like the first ones, as Lila stated, to have this footage in our hands and really understand and investigate where they came from. And then, so in these we went on our boats and we had these, we went to their habitats and we wanted to discuss why this was happening and why these behaviors were happening. Okay, so this is the opportunities to deploy these cameras on other animals are endless, and so we were able to really just understand where this comes from and how they interact. But we'd like to thank Nathan and Jack, Bill and Alex, and the CEI interns, the communications team, the kitchen staff, the boathouse, and the Finding Our Way organization for funding this project. With that, we'd like to thank you guys for listening and open it up to you for any questions you have.
see other turtles curious about the camera on another turtle, on the turtle that had the camera? Did they ever try to poke at it, or?
We didn't see any examples of that, but that being said, we don't really have a way to tell whether turtles are approaching the camera with the turtle because of the camera. We can safely assume that these turtles interact generally on like a regular basis anyways. So so far, we don't have any way to tell whether the camera is affecting that, but I think we're definitely gonna look into that in the future.
One idea that we have that we're exploring is to deploy 2 cameras at the same time on 2 different turtles that are in the same area and hope that maybe they'll get footage of each other from 2 different perspectives. This is like a risk because obviously 2 turtles in a small area, you don't know if they're going to see each other, but we have repeatedly seen the same turtles in a small area multiple times, so that's an idea we have and might try out in the future.
One other thing we wanted to possibly look at is deploying having a way to look at the turtle from both the front perspective and the back perspective, because then we can see if any turtles from the back are reacting anyway to the camera that is abnormal, or what we can tell is happening. So actually our first idea for this whole project was going to be a conservation effort, and we were going to look at how much a turtle eats. And the question was what surprised us about this project, and the answer is, in the beginning we were trying to look at what a turtle eats and how much an environment can sustain, like how much a certain environment can sustain, like how many turtles. But then we didn't find any data or any footage, basically any, on the turtles feeding. So I think that was probably the biggest surprise for all of us, because we really were not expecting to kind of turn this project into what it is today. We were mostly looking at foraging, and so that was, I guess, probably the biggest surprise for me personally.
I was curious if it seems like most of the behavior that you saw in the city, but if you're using anything to do with anything else that they're reproductive behaviors, what kind of social behaviors?
We are only actually studying juvenile sea turtles, and they do not mate when they're juveniles. So we are studying from ages 0 to 35, and once 35, once they start to mate is when they move out into the open ocean. So we don't see any turtles that would be of mating age.
Question, was there any sense that the turtles knew the camera was on their back, or any behavior like they tried to knock it off, or did you lose any cameras?
As you can see in that graph, the first 90 minutes, we couldn't really say that it was the most authentic data because of the higher state of stress that the turtle is in after we capture it. Like I said before, the first 30 minutes, they spend almost all of their time swimming, and we think this is just because they're really stressed out. But after that first 90 minutes, we think that either they forget that the camera is there, or it starts to not bother them. And so an idea that we've had is to have a delayed start time on the cameras. So instead of having half of our footage be that unusable data in that first 90 minutes, we can delay it and have a full 3 hours of usable information.
Can I jump on the second part of that really quick? About I believe you also asked if we lost any cameras. So, I don't know, we press, there we go. So, the transmitter, radio, that whole recapturing process of the camera is not perfect for sure, and we have lost a camera. It actually, on the buoy we wrote, if found, please call Cape Luca Island Institute, whatever, and one of the cameras that we lost actually made it to Saddleback Key in the Exumas, quite a long way. And here's a photo that somebody took who found it. So we just recently got that camera back, and we have not included that data in our presentation. But yeah, it just got sent back to us, which is really exciting. So we have lost cameras.
And just to kind of touch on the earlier part of your question where you asked if the turtles were like aware of the camera on their backs, we did see higher rates of carapace scrubbing on substrates in the first 90 minutes. And we have no exact way to tell, but I think it's pretty inferred that the turtles were likely rubbing their shells and carapaces on the substrates to try and remove the camera. But like we said, after a certain while, they kind of cooled out with it and they just swam with the camera on their back and it wasn't a big deal.
So, does the epoxy that you put the camera on the back, does it hurt the turtle's shell at all, or do we know what the impacts? Does it eventually come off entirely, and then what effects does that have on the ocean itself?
So yes, we took that into account that it is made out of plastic, but it doesn't hurt the turtle because it's actually, it kind of feels like a fingernail. The turtle can't feel its when it's on its carapace, but it is plastic right now. Although we do look in the similar environments that we find the turtles, and we often actually find the turtle that we put the camera on with the epoxy still on, and we can take them off. But the ones that we do not find, they come off a week later. But there is a new research that we're actually going to be looking into, which is suction cups that we're going to be putting on the carapace, which has a similar thing to a galvanic time release where it pops the suction cups off and the whole unit comes off without leaving a trace in the ocean, and we will retrace that.
Do you need a permit to put a camera on a turtle?
Yes, yeah, we do.
Use the tree cutting.